Alright. I noticed that a lot of our Protosses were having struggles in PvT, so I wanted to go through the matchup in general and show some concepts that I think would be helpful just in general in PvT. So this is a VOD/coaching session for exactly that. I want to cover not necessarily the specifics of PvT openings and builds and things like that, but I want to get into more conceptually what I'm thinking about at different stages of the game in the first replay, and then we're in the late stages of this replay and the other two replays. I want to go into engagements for one and explain the logic and strategy behind properly engaging, and then also go into some win conditions. So each one of these replays has a different win condition, and I want to get into those as we go. So I pretty much always open 23 Nexus nowadays. I used to open 28, but now I've switched mostly to 23. I think they're both perfectly fine builds in PvT. I wouldn't do any other build as a standard build. So I recommend either one of those to go into a PvT. At this stage where we are just macroing up until the Nexus comes up, really we're just trying to focus on hitting our build, and the only thing in the back of our mind should be BBS. That's the only thing we should really be concerned with at this point. So on 3 or 4 player maps, I like to scout after core. This is Eclipse, a 2-player map, so I actually don't probe scout at all. I just make a pylon behind my natural and run them back home, because you really don't need to scout until Dragoon, so it's not the biggest deal. So we are just focusing on hitting our build and being ready for a BBS. So this clearly wasn't a BBS, so we're just going to send our Dragoon across the map and continue to execute our build. So here, this begins the next phase of the game, more or less. So when your first Dragoon reaches your opponent's natural, you need to scout what's going on. And yes, you can have a probe arrive earlier if you were on a 4-player map and got lucky, for example. But right now is the most important time to scout. So whenever you reach your opponent with this Dragoon, you need to push forward and look for the command center. So in this situation, there's several things to look for. The biggest thing is there a bunker? So if there's no bunker, then he's on one base. It's got to be some kind of delayed command center or some kind of aggression. Excuse me. So that's the biggest differentiator, is there a bunker or not? So if it's one base, we have to react. We have to prepare for a 2-factory push, or a 1-base drop, or an FD, or a siege expand. Those are the big 4 that could come out of a 1-base play at this point. If you see a bunker, then we need to know what is the command center timing. So if we run forward and the command center is done, then it's a Rax FE. If it's about 2/3 of the way, or about where this is, when I ran forward it was about 1,000 health, it's a refinery FE. So they get the refinery, Rax refinery, and then their command center, which gets them a little bit faster factory. If it's just starting, then it's a factory bunker expand, meaning they got the factory and then the command center. And then finally, if there's no command center, then that means that they're faking you out. They're trying to get a bunker up and hoping you won't scout the command center, and then they're 2-facting behind it, most likely. Or they're just bad and their command center is late, in which case we can just react as if it's a 2-factory and still be even or ahead. So it's not a big deal. So that's the big thing to do right now, is scout with this Dragoon while we're hitting our build. Once we have the scouting information, we need to react accordingly. So because it's a refinery FE here, I'm going to get 2 probes on 23 when this pylon finishes, I should be starting a Dragoon and then getting my Robo. And then I'm going to keep making probes and get 2 more gateways, up to 3. So that's my reaction to a Rax FE, or excuse me, a refinery FE. So I'm not going to get into all of the reactions. Like I said, the details are not the purpose of this video. So you just need to react accordingly. So now that we know what Terran is doing, the next stage of the game has 3 things that we need to focus on. Number 1, we need to focus on taking our third. And I mean, it feels a little bit early right now, but really it should be in the back of our mind now to start thinking about, when am I taking my third? Obviously we're continuously making probes and we're making Dragoons and teching to observers, but the third timing is the next thing that we need to react, basically. So if we do a 23 Nexus, we can expand off of 7 Dragoons. And the way we do that is we sit here with our Dragoons at the natural, typically, if they have some kind of bunker expand. And when we have 7 Dragoons, and then we start to posture at the third to take a new Nexus. And when we hit 400 minerals with 7 Dragoons, we sit and wait for a push out, and if no push out comes, when we have 400 minerals, we take our Nexus. If a push out comes during that period where we have 7 Dragoons and we're waiting for minerals, then we just don't take the Nexus, and instead we make a round of 3 Dragoons. So then we'll be safe against whatever push Terran is doing. So that's one of our focuses in this time period, is when am I taking a third? The second focus is rushing for observers, because very quickly we're going to need to see, is Terran going for a 4-fact push, or are they going for a command center, or something else, right? So we should be thinking about our Nexus, and we should be thinking about getting this observer as fast as possible. The third thing we're focused on depends. If they go for a Rax FE or a refinery FE, then our focus should be on beating on this bunker, which includes sniping an SCV or 2. That's actually really important during this stage. Rax FE and refinery FE will get their command center up faster than we get our Nexus. So in order to even out the worker count, we actually need, or maybe not need, but we really should be sniping an SCV or 2 during this. If Terran went for anything but a Rax FE or a refinery FE, then we need to focus on vultures during this phase. So that means our second Dragoon needs to be sitting at this ramp. We need to be making a pylon wall here and jamming it up with Dragoons once we need to have, once we need to move our Dragoon from here to the natural to block. And then when we're taking our third, we need to make sure we're blocking the choke and making pylons. In fact, for the rest of the game, vultures are a concern, and a primary concern of ours, where we need to always be thinking, is a vulture going to run into my base and kill every probe I have? So always be thinking, how many pylons can I put in my wall at each location so that I don't get a run by. Ideally, you're going to be tight all the time. So those are the 3 things you should be focusing on. Like I said before, I've got my Dragoons at the front. I'm blocking my choke with more Dragoons. I'm producing up to 7. In this game, I actually go to 8. I think that was just accidental. And then I'm taking my third because there's no push coming. I even take out his bunker. I think he stopped repairing it because Siege was finishing. But either way, no push is coming, so I'm safe to take this third. Okay, so we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish. We beat on the bunker, we got our observer out as ASAP, and we took our third. The next thing we need to focus on is scouting with this observer, because either there's going to be a big push or there's going to be some kind of tech, meaning academy, engineering bay, and the one that makes upgrades, I forgot, the armory, or they're going to get a command center or some combination thereof. Hey guys.
Can you tell me all the secrets?
That's the plan. That's the hope right here.
Weaknesses and to exploit.
Vultures are good. That's kind of the key here.
I've heard.
Yeah. Yeah, so I've gone through the early game up until now. Basically, my thought is I'm not going to go into specific build orders and reactions and things. I'm going more conceptually and what I'm thinking about at each stage. So I've gone through the opening and what I'm thinking about, as well as the different things that we're scouting for with our first Dragoon, and then how we react and take our third. And now I'm getting into reacting with the Observer. So if you have questions, comments, whatever, please feel free. But I will continue on. So at this stage, our main focuses are building constant probes. We want to continuously make probes. Obviously, there's some specific cuts during 23 and 28 Nexus builds where we purposefully cut probes. But other than that, we want to continuously make probes up until 9 minutes, because that's about when you'll have 65 probes. So this phase, a big focus is constantly producing probes. The next focus is, what is Terran doing? So in this specific game, I see that he has an eBay and only 2 factories. He's got a relatively high tank count for the time period that this observer reached him, and he's got an academy coming up. So in this case, I don't see a command center yet, but I know he has spent a lot of money on eBay and academy, and he has quite a few tanks. So I don't want to run and get a 4th yet, since he's got a fairly high tank count and no command center. But I can start my tech, my second gas, and my citadel. And I want to resume Dragoon production because this tank count is relatively high. So I want to be safe in case he goes for some vultures and starts to come after me. And then of course I need to watch for more factories here. So at this point, because I've seen 2 factories and a little bit of the detection tech, more or less, he could either just throw down 4 more factories and go for a 6-fact push, or he can make a command center. Both of those are valid options for him. So I'm watching for the factories because that's the more critical I'm gonna die moment. So we're teching towards arbiters because of that, because we see that he's not doing a major push. And then right when we see this command center, we want to take a 4th, because he's been on 2 factories for so long and we've been on 3 gates for so long that it's actually safe for us to immediately take a 4th. So I transferred a little late here, and I think I missed some probes, but right when I see that command center building, I'm taking a 4th. And so this kind of accentuates the fact that we want to be as unbelievably greedy as possible in PvT, because there's no way to punish here, right? Like, he's got so many tanks, there's no way that I can bust in here and do anything because I just have Dragoons. In theory, you can do the new style with Zealots and Templar, but in reality, most of the time you can't do much damage to a Terran. So we just want to be ultra greedy at this stage of the game. So from here, really our focus is continuously building probes, which this game I mistakenly stop at 51. That was a mistake of mine. But we want to continuously build probes. We want to focus on our tech, getting up our arbiters, and our +2 weapons is the key upgrade, and taking our 4th here. And we need to watch for the factory count at all times at this point. He's going up to 4 factories, so I need to get up to 6 gateways. So you pretty much always want to have about 2 more gateways than they have factories. So as these are coming up, I'm adding on a 4th gate, and shortly I'll be adding 2 more up here. And so at this point, we should, at 9 minutes, have 65 probes, ideally. Like I said, I screwed this game up a little bit, but ideally at 9 minutes, that's where we'll be. And then we're just going to stick to, once we have that saturation, we're going to stick to 8 gateways until we're maxed, basically. In theory, you can go up to 12 if you're not planning to take a 5th base, but I really prefer to get that 5th base up. I think it's much more safe. If you do the 12 gate version, you really have to do some damage, but if you do an 8 gate version, it's your army's not that much weaker, and you get to take a 5th early, which is really nice. So, like I said, at 9 minutes we should be at full probe saturation, so we can, and on 4 bases, so we can add 2 cannons at bases that are relatively vulnerable, and 1 cannon at bases that have walls. And from here we just macro up until maxed, basically, off of 8 gateways, and then take a 5th base when we're around 160 to 180 supply. And that's more or less how I play every single PvT, where we have this phase of scouting and reacting, and then we have with scouting with our goon and reacting, and then scouting with our observer and reacting, and then getting 4 bases with 65 probes, then adding up to 8 gateways with arbiter tech, and then taking a 5th once we're around 160 supply. And that's kind of the pattern that we're going to see in all 3 of these games, is basically exactly what I've shown here. And so this is where I want to start talking about the late game concepts. So specifically, I'm going to talk about, in all 3 replays that I'm going to show, I'm going to talk about engagements, and then in each replay I have a different win condition that I want to talk about. And they're really sensitive to the map. So on this map on Eclipse, Terran has to have their army in a relatively vulnerable position, because they could put their army up in the main, but their 3rd would be extremely vulnerable. They can't put it in the natural because there's really not enough space, and again, the 3rd would be fairly vulnerable. So they have to sit their army right out here, which is fairly vulnerable. Like if you compare like Fighting Spirit, where there's just like a tiny little bridge and then a tiny little ramp, and that's all you can push through, this is super vulnerable. So on this map, I like to go for a push right when I get my first stasis. So that should incorporate about 20 Dragoons, because we constantly make Dragoons up to about 20, and then we switch into Zealot production with legs. And our first Arbiter should have 100 energy right when we do the push, and our second Arbiter should be popping. So in this game, I decide to poke on this ramp because it's really APM intensive for Terran to like adjust, right? So an ideal Terran shape, I mean, this is a good spread for him to defend from this angle, but if he sees this army up here, he needs to split his tanks as best he can and have it in an arc that defends this ramp. He needs to get mines down, he needs to get vultures in front, he should start, you know, a couple more supply depots. It takes a lot of attention for him to come here. So if I poke forward here, he has to react. So he's putting tanks forward, he's getting vultures in the way, he's adding a supply depot. And then I just go somewhere else. I wasn't ready anyway because my stasis wasn't ready. So I just poked just to force him to have attention drawn this way and to have him prepared for a push this direction. I run back and I grab another round of zealots. And Now I'm ready for a push because my stasis will be ready by the time I'm there, and I have about a control group and a half of zealots. So this push was free. Like it caused his vultures to be in this position, and like a phenomenal Terran would realize that I'm not here anymore and pivot to this direction, scan here and see, and then pivot here to defend. But most Terrans won't do that. So that's kind of a free way to get a better engage. And so the goal with this push is not to kill the opponent. I mean, you can, but I have a 5th base. If I wasn't bad, I would have 65 probes. I would have Arbiter Tech upgrades. I mean, everything's fine for me. So my goal with this push is to trade Zealots and my first stasis for tanks. If I do more damage, great. So my main focus here is going to be, let's get the Zealots onto the tanks, let's get a big fat stasis, and let's save our Dragoons. And that's all I want to do. So engaging in PvT, it's ultra important to have the biggest possible arc that we can get. So the way we do that, we can grab control groups and like send some up here and some down here and split it all perfectly, but just move everything to here and it's going to naturally spread out like this. And then as you're seeing everything clump, you can grab certain clumps of units and send some down here and some up here and some in the middle, so that you have a nice big arc like this. So the next thing we want to do, ideally, in an engagement is grab like 2 zealots here, grab 2 zealots here, and 2 zealots here. And then we're going to move command way back here. So the Terran, this is a pretty typical Terran setup here. He would ideally have more shit right here in the way, but this is pretty normal, I would say. We want to have our arc as big as possible, so this is actually quite good. And then we want to attack move everything as deep as we can in the Terran army. So we grab these zealots, and these zealots, and we move in command here. I don't know if I did it this game. Yeah.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
If you saw like a bunch of mines down where you're trying to push from, would you just try to clear the mines first, or how would you approach it then?
So you want to clear as many mines as you can without getting into tank range. So we would basically lead with our Dragoons, so we would have like a control group here leading and clearing out any mines that are up here, and a control group here clearing out any, until we start hearing tank shots, and then we back them up just a little bit, and then start to split, and then do our push in.
Okay, makes sense.
And the reason that I grabbed a couple zealots here, and a couple zealots here, and a couple zealots here is also for mines. Because if we have like a giant clump of zealots run through a big minefield, then the mines are going to be cleared, but it's going to kill a whole control group of zealots. 2 zealots is plenty to drag 8 mines if they're all stacked on top of one another. So that's the main reason why we send some first, if we can, ideally. So we make our arc, and I cannot I can't overstate how important the arc is. So many times when you look at a low-level replay, or even half of my replays, when an engagement versus Terran goes bad, it's because we're clumped and like pushing through one little area. The arc is huge. So we grab those zealots, we right-click them here. The next thing we do is, okay, so I don't do it this game. So the next thing we do is we grab all of our zealots, which we should have on their own hotkey. We're going to move command all of our zealots in. So the first thing we do is a couple zealots in our arc, right click them, wait like 2 seconds so they have a lead. Then we're going to move command all of our zealots, attack move all of our Dragoons right here. And so the goal is to have all of our zealots as deep as possible so that the splash will deal damage to the Terran units, while our Dragoons are cleaning up the one of tanks here as they're pushing forward. So your zealots are doing most of the damage by attacking and splash and mine dragging, and your dragoons are cleaning up, at least initially. So we're moving our zealots in. We want to take our arbiter during this process and find the fattest stasis we can get. So the ideal case is a big group of tanks in the back, which I managed to get here. I do get a couple zealots, but it's not a big deal because we got 4 tanks. And then we want to take our zealots and attack move them once they're on top of tanks. And then as our zealots clump up, we want to drive them further forward. We want to grab our dragoons and split them, make sure that dragoons aren't getting out of position, blah blah blah. And so this went like unbelievably well for me. But just to go through it one more time. So the exact movements, I mean, we move command up, and then we grab some units, so we spread them out. And then I'm going to take, I have my zealots hotkeyed on 1 and 2, and my dragoons on 3 and 4. So I go 1, move, 2, move, 3, attack, move, 4, attack, move right now. And then I grab this arbiter and I start looking for a stasis. I see that these zealots are on top of tanks, so I start attack moving them. And at this point, you don't have to micro anymore. Like, you can, like, most of the micro is done. Every piece of micro after this is just extra value. So if you have the ability to micro at this point, then do it. If you don't, just go home and macro. It's fine, because your army is going to kind of do its thing at this point. And then we just run home and start macroing, which I did. The key, though, is if this didn't go as well as it did, then I would need to retreat all of my dragoons right when all my zealots die. And that's typical. You're usually not going to do as much damage as I did here. This was an exceptional engagement. And my opponent had too much stuff down here because of my the way that I forced his army down. So normally we would do this engagement exactly as I said, and then when our zealots all die, we would retreat with our dragoons. But in this case, I had such an overwhelming advantage, I stayed. So this is a very common way for me to win games that have a relatively vulnerable army position for Terran. So that's Eclipse, like we see here, but also Polypoid is relatively vulnerable because Terrans typically take the high ground, the ridge, and that's relatively vulnerable because they have to keep their army on that ridge, but they also have to keep it back at their natural to cover their natural and the 4th position. So this push is really strong there as well. So that's one of the win conditions that I wanted to show here is if you macro well and attack with your first stasis, you can just win games. I mean, this is a tier 0 Terran, and he just melted to it, right? The second win condition I want to go through is when you can't push at all, where you just Terran just gets to have bases. So Circuit Breakers is a quintessential example of that. And Fighting Spirit is another example of that. On those maps, you just can't push Terran at all. Where's my mini-map? Nope, not mini-map, diplomacy. So if Terran, let's say Terran is on 4 bases on Circuit Breakers, which is typical, there's no way to push them because if they have this base, and this base, and obviously the main, this space is super hard to push because they can wall here, and then just a couple of tanks here and a couple tanks here and one back here will destroy an infinite number of units from Protoss. So we can't really push here. This bridge is super hard to push because, for one, he can have mines and tanks up here, but more importantly, when we push down here, he has this giant arc where he has tanks down here, and tanks here, all focused right here. So we can't push here either. And then obviously these bridges are suicide as well because he can have tanks here and here and here. So circuit breakers, you can't do the push that I showed before. It just doesn't work. So instead, we have to just kind of allow Terran to have that and instead go for more late game strategies. So since... Yep, go ahead.
Sorry, you might be about to say this, but on a map like Circuit Breakers, would you consider going recall first?
When you say go recall first, do you mean research it or use it first? Because
research it first.
No, because if you research stasis right away and then if you research recall right away, you will never have the energy to use it. You should always go stasis then recall, because you can fit both researches in before your first arbiter has recall energy. So
okay.
Yes,
I didn't know that.
You can go recall first, but you should be researching stasis and then recall. Okay. So since you guys weren't here for the very beginning of the last one, I'll run through the very beginning of my thought process again. So in this stage of the game, we typically either do a 23 Nexus or a 28 Nexus. I mean, there's other options, but those are the main ones. Our main focus right now is hitting our build and BBS. That's the only things we're worried about. There's really nothing else that Terran can do that we care about at this point. So we're just hitting our build, watching for an SCV that might be making a bunker here, and scouting with our probe, and that's all we care about. Once we scout, or once we have our first Dragoon out, that's when we need to start considering our scouting options. So when our first Dragoon reaches Terran, we need to scout for what the Terran opened, basically. You can see it earlier with your probe, but it really doesn't matter. You really only need to scout now. So the main thing to see is there a bunker? So if there is a bunker, then we need to look at the command center timing. If there isn't a bunker, then we just assume that some kind of aggression is coming. Because it's either a 2-factory, which means we need Dragoons. It's a 1-base drop, which means we need Dragoons. It's an FD, meaning we need Dragoons. Or it's a siege expand, in which case we don't really need to get a bunch of goons, but the command center is so late that it doesn't hurt us that much. We're not that far behind if they siege expand and we expected a 2-factory. So if there's no bunker, we just assume that it's a 2-factory and prepare accordingly. If there is a bunker, then we need to run forward and look at the command center. So when our goon first arrives, we just run past, look, and run back. And if the command center is done, then it's a Rax FE. If the command center is about 2/3 done, then it's a refinery FE, which is very similar, but they get their gas before their command center, and that allows for a much faster factory. And so we need to be prepared for a potential relatively early push with like the 3-tank push that's been more popularized. If we push in and see that there is a command center just starting, then that's a factory bunker expand, and we need to make sure our second Dragoon blocks for a vulture run by. And then if we see no command center, then they're trying to fake us out. They're just putting up a bunker to make us think that there's a command center, but in reality they're doing a 2-factory or some other 1-base play. So this scout is the biggest thing to think about right now. And then, he's being a scumbag. So then now, obviously we're doing our reaction to whatever we saw. So in this case, I'm getting a robo, starting my Dragoon, getting one more gateway because it was a Raxaphy. And then in this next stage of the game, there's really 3 things we need to focus on. Well, obviously we're still hitting our build. We're making probes and dragoons, but our like strategic focuses are rushing for an observer because we need to see what Terran is doing, and deciding when can we take our third. So the standard time that we can take a third is with 7 dragoons against a build like this, well, or against a Terran who's not doing some kind of like hyper aggression. We can take a Nexus off of 7 dragoons. So we're just going to make 7 goons. We're going to posture for a third, and then when we have 400 minerals, we take our Nexus. If he pushes out while we have while we're waiting for that 400 minerals, then we just don't take the Nexus and instead make a round of dragoons. And if we need to, throw down a battery and defend. So that's kind of the critical part of 23 Nexus specifically, is that it allows you to get this third command center or third Nexus up super fast, or make a round of dragoons, and the timings work out so that you're safe no matter what. But just to know, that means we always have to have something here watching. If you decide to do this build and expand off of 7 dragoons, you have to have a dragoon or a probe here to watch for a push out, or he could push out while you're taking this and you just lose the game. The observer is too late. You have to have something here to watch. So we're focusing on Robotech, we're focusing on when to get our third, and the last thing to focus on depends on what the Terran did. If they did a Raxaphy or a Refinery FE, then we are focusing on these dragoons. We want to constantly beat on this bunker and rush forward and kill SCVs when we can. Because if he does a Raxaphy, he is ahead on expansion timing. So we need to even out the score by sniping an SCV or 2. And that's pretty much the whole focus in this portion of the game. And I think most of you guys showed up about when I started talking about the observer scouting and all that fun stuff. So I won't reiterate that. We can jump right into the late game. So in this game, my opponent did the normal circuit breakers stuff. I mean, he took 3 bases relatively quick. He's taking a 4th relatively quick because I can't do much about it. I've taken a 4th extremely quickly, and I've cut probes. Apparently I have a probe problem because I want 65, but I'm at 58 this time. And then, you know, I'm delaying the 4th a little bit as I can. Not the end of the world for him. He can easily defend it. So I buy a few seconds off of this and trade decently well. But really, I can't do anything. So I'm just amassing right now. So like I said before, you want to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Between 8 and 12 gateways is what you want up until max. So here I'm getting 9 gateways and about to take my 5th. And especially when they go for this 4-base style, you need to be taking a 5th as soon as you possibly can, and then posturing for a 6th as well. But basically, our win condition here is just never let him get a 5th. Because we have so much time when they're sitting on 4 bases like this that we have the ability to get up a crap load of gateways and to get up arbiter energy and prevent them from ever taking a 5th. So that's a real win condition, but only if you don't suicide your army. Many times players will rush in and try to pressure, but I'm just sitting on a reasonable gateway count. I'm taking my 5th base and about to be 6th base, and I'm adding gateways, and that's it. I accidentally make a Corsair as well, but ignore that. So in this situation where they're turtling, right when we max out, which should be, I mean, this is a relatively late max out, but right now I should be adding gates. I should be at basically 0 money if I possibly can. I don't do a phenomenal job of it, but really this 1,000, 1,500 minerals should just be gateways, because I'm not spending on anything else. I'm maxed out. I have my infrastructure here. I have my upgrades, everything else. I have my bases up, and I'm just sitting. I don't need to take 8 bases because he's on 4. As long as I'm ahead by 1 or 2 bases, I'm fine. So I should be adding just a crap load of gateways and being ready for a push out. Recall is a consideration here, but the key is you only want to recall if you have enough stasis and enough army to survive the push out after. So in this case, I have 3 arbiters now. Those 2 got EMP'd, so it's a little bit dangerous for me to recall. So I don't need to. I can just add a shitload more gateways and just wait, because he's on 4 bases, I'm on 5. That's advantageous to me, so I can sit. It's fine. I'm gaining arbiter energy while I wait here. I go in anyway because I'm a fool, but recalls are fine here. I actually don't think this was an ideal recall, but I got lucky because his tanks are out of position. But all I'm doing is making sure that he's never going to take a 5th, so he's distracted. That's my whole goal, is I can distract him with this. I don't care if I deal a ton of damage, but I have enough gateways that I can recall and remake instantly. So I'm already maxed again, even though the recall was just cleaned up. So in this position, another key thing that a lot of players screw up is they will get antsy before these gateways are up and recall too early. If you recall that early and you have no gateways to reinforce, he just runs out and fucking kills you, because you've traded 30 supply and an arbiter for SCVs, and he still has his whole damn army, so he's just going to push out and kill you. So that recall, I mean, I should have waited until I had these 2 stasis just to be more safe, but the fact that I waited until I had a good gateway count means that I won't just instantly die to a crackback, basically. And now notice how I'm very slowly taking bases. Like, I'm taking a 6th now, and I'm posturing for a 7th base, but this is actually going to be another gateway cluster first. This isn't going to be an expansion. Like I said, if I never let him have a 5th, I don't need 7 bases. I just need 6, and I'm fine. So I am strictly focusing on my win condition, which is he can never have a 5th base. If he never gets a 5th, we will win the game. So now I have a shitload of money. I have a shitload of gates. I have 2 stargates of arbiters coming. I have even more gates here, and I'm adding more gates here. So all I need to do at this point is prevent Terran from taking this 5th by trading over and over. So this game, all I'm going to do is I'm going to engage, just like I said before, except now I have multiple arbiters and I have a much bigger army. I'm going to collect everything. I'm going to spread out as much as I can. And then I'm just going to throw armies at him over and over. So see how I spread out? I try to be patient here. And then I move command zealots, attack move dragoons, grab my arbiters, and stasis the biggest chunks, and then attack move my zealots so that they start to fight. Right when I run out of zealots, I back up, or at least I should. Right now I should be backing up. There we go. So the backup was a little bit late, but I accomplished my goal. I traded my zealots for tanks, and now I'm remaxing. Another thing to note is keeping your arbiters alive is unbelievably important. Just being able to babysit your arbiters in a PvT makes a huge difference as well. So the fact that we saved our dragoons and our arbiters is critical to the strategy here of just maxing out, and then right when I'm maxed out and have my army in the middle again, I'm going to attack again. And again, we're just denying this fifth. That's all we're trying to do. So I'm maxed out, I push in, move command zealots, attack move my dragoons, stasis. My zealots are... Actually, in this one I trade quite well, so I don't need to retreat. But I don't want to get too far either, because I'm out of zealots. So I should stop right here, back up, and focus on killing these stasis units. Which I somewhat do. So I'm denying the space. That's my entire focus, is denying the space. I haven't even taken this yet, or I just did as I say it. It doesn't matter. I don't need this. All I need is I have more bases than him. I'm just going to keep denying this. So I'm maxed out again. I'm just going to get my army together, and I'm not pushing in. Do not push in at this point, because our entire goal is denying this fourth. That's all we do. So we max out again. He has to push out. He has no other option, because his natural's about to mine out. His main is mined out. He has to take this fifth ASAP. So he has to push out. So we just rush in when he does, clean him up, trade away our zealots, back up again, and repeat. And that's this whole game. I'm just going to keep doing that until this command center never gets up. So that's another very common win condition in PvT, is to just never let them get a fourth or a fifth. On Fighting Spirit, it would be never let them get a fourth. But in this specific example, it's circuit breakers. So again, I'm just throwing a maxed army. When my zealots die, I should have retreated, but I didn't here. And that's pretty much the game. I guess we don't need to finish watching it, but basically I clean this up one more time, deny this fifth, and by this point he's totally mined out, so there's nothing more he can do. So we talked about Eclipse and Polypoid, where we have a vulnerable Terran army, so we can push with our first stasis and have a bust timing, and that's one win condition in PvT. And then we talked about a map like CB or Fighting Spirit, where we just sit, wait, and we only start trading once our gateway clusters are up. And we don't take too many bases, because we just need to be slightly ahead of Terran, not way ahead of Terran. But then there's a third win condition that I think most people don't even consider. Like, you've certainly experienced it, but you may not have even noticed it. And so that's what we're going to review in this game. So I want to make an analog to PvZ. So in a PvZ, obviously we're the Protoss players in this scenario, but Terran in TVP is very similar to Protoss in PvZ. And what I mean by that is, we in PvZ will typically take our natural and then we sit for a long time. And we get our tech up, we get a nice big army, and then around 12 minutes we'll push out and take a third and a fourth. Terran does the same thing. They sit on usually 3 bases, maybe 4, and they just sit, get their tech up, get their army up, and then they push out to start taking more bases. So for us in PvZ, I'm sure you've experienced games where you can't push out, they've got a lurker contain or whatever, and you can't push out until like 15 minutes or something. And you take your third, and then you take your fourth at like 16 or 17 minutes. So you're on 4 bases, which should be okay, but it's not because you've completely mined out your main and natural. So you're effectively on 2 bases. You may have 3 or 4 gases, but as far as minerals, you're on 2. So those games feel awful because we should have this 4 base mineral economy that's powering up a crap load of gateways. We can bully the Zerg and take a 5th base super fast because we have a ton of minerals. We can put down the Nexus, add a shitload of cannons, and be super safe, right? And if we take that 12-minute Nexus and then 14-minute Nexus, we can do that because we spread out our probes relatively early, and we can have like 1 per patch on our main and natural, and then full saturation on the 3rd and 4th, and we feel great. Well, the same thing happens for Terran in PvT, where if we can keep them on 3 bases for an extremely long time, then the same effect happens. They'll mine out of their main and natural, and they'll be on 1 base if we deny their 4th long enough, or if they take a 4th relatively late, they're on 2 bases. And you've probably experienced this, where like Terran just doesn't feel like they have enough stuff, and they just fall apart. And that typically happens if they purposefully, or if you force them to not have their 4th on time. So that's the win condition I want to talk about in this specific game. So I'm not going to go into the full detail of the early game and the mid game. We're just going to start getting deeper into the game now. So in this game, my opponent goes for Rax FE, I pressure their bunker, blah blah blah, take a fast 3rd, all that fun stuff. And he goes for a fast drop, I repel it with some damage, but it's not the end of the world. And he gets a super fast 3rd here, and also a super late armory. So in this game, he's going to have a really strong economy, a really big army, but not well upgraded because these armories are so late. And I'm going to lose a shitload of bases, and it doesn't matter because I'm going to delay his 4th a lot, to the point where he's going to be mined out before it matters. So I've done my usual thing. I've cut probes at 9 minutes, which I'm starting to think my probe, I'm not so good at producing probes constantly. I have my bases up. I've got my gateway count starting to come up. I've got 7 gates. I should have 1 more. I've got map control. And then he pushes out here on 3 bases. So I've kind of been greedy here. I'm taking my 5th quite early. I should be taking it at like 140 supply at minimum. So I'm getting a little greedy here, and he pushes. But he still doesn't have a 4th. So all I need to do is delay this 4th. So I'm going to try to defend here as best I can, but I'm pure Dragoon. So I cancel this 5th, so he denies that. I don't have Zealot legs yet, or if I do, I have very few Zealots. So instead of taking my 5th here, I just take it here, because I know he's on 3 base, so I don't need to... He's on 3 base, so I don't need to like vehemently defend this space. I can just take one elsewhere. Once he sieges up here, I know that he's gonna take this base. But I try. This is actually incorrect, where I get my zealots, and I try to bust here because I know his tank count is relatively low, but his mine count is high enough that they melt really quickly. So I just retreat. I take some losses here. I shouldn't have engaged at all because I'm actually down on supply, but I am on about to be 4 bases, and I know he's on 3, so it's okay. He is taking a 4th here. I'm trying to take a 5th. He's denying it for a long time. But what we're going to see is that I'm actually going to deny his fourth coming up here in a minute. So give me a second. Trying to digest this while I think of how I'm going to prove the next step. So at this point, it's 4 base versus 4 base, but he hasn't saturated this yet. So he is still on 65 probes on 3 bases, and he's getting relatively low in his main and natural. But because we're spread out over 4 bases for a longer period than him, we're going to mine out later than him. So it's not the end of the world that we haven't taken a 5th. You know, he's denied a 5th, he's killed a 4th, he's denied another 5th, but he's just now got up his 4th. So that's okay for us. My whole focus now, after I've cleaned up this army, is I never want him, or I want to delay the 4th as long as I possibly can. So this base is denied again. Like, it feels so bad to be at 15 minutes and only be on 4 bases as Protoss. Like, you would normally take this at like 12 minutes, right? Or 11 minutes. So this feels really bad. But I'm able to come here and deny this 4th again. And that's all that matters. I may not have a 5th, but he doesn't have a 4th. So I'm okay. I'm not freaking out and like trying to take a bunch of bases at once. I'm just letting him have this. Take another base over here. Watch for his 4th. Watch for his 4th. And just try to never let him take a 4th. Or at least delay it as long as I possibly can. So I'm defending. Doesn't matter. All that matters is he doesn't have a 4th yet. That's all that matters. I'm cleaning up, I'm engaging, stasising, but again, this 4th is so late because we were able to take out this, that he's going to be mined out of his main and natural, and that's going to allow me to stabilize. So again, we lost another base here. We are still on 4 bases, but it doesn't matter because we've delayed this 4th so long. So right now, normally, if we take a 5th base at this point, we're feeling awful. We're on 4 bases, he's on 4 bases. But our 4th was so early compared to his that our main is still mining. It doesn't have a ton, but it's still mining. Our natural is still mining, it's got plenty in it. Our 3rd has tons, or this is our 3rd. Our 3rd has plenty in it, and our 4th has a ton in it. But he is about to mine out on these 2 bases. So he's going to be on 2 base versus like 3.5 base very shortly because we've denied this for so long. And again, I'm going to push up here. I'm going to lose so much army here. Like, I am throwing away so much army, but I'm denying most of his mining. He had to return SCVs. So I'm trading horribly here. But it doesn't matter. I'm denying the 4th for even longer. So even though my 5th was ungodly late, I'm still not mining from it. Even though I threw away an entire army, the fact that his 4th is so late is all that matters. Again, I'm denying this 4th. Just because I've pushed so hard here, I just throw some reinforcements this way, and I again deny the 4th. So this one's going to be taken out once these reinforcements come. And so he still doesn't have a 4th base. So at this point, this is when he cracks, right? So the trades that I've been making, I mean, I've had good stasises, and the army fights have been a thing, but the most important thing is that he is now mined out of his main and natural because we've delayed this 4th for so long. And now we have a fresh base here, a fresh base, or a still mining base here, and a fresh base here. And he only has 2 fresh bases, or rather 1 actually. We delayed him so long he only has 1 fresh base. So we've effectively won. Like, we've had even fights this whole time, and he has 1 more push. But once this push is over, he can't do anything because I have 3 base versus 1. And that's all because I've denied this 4th for so ungodly long that even though I had my 5th delayed for so long, it's still advantageous to me now. So this example of a game I don't think was as cohesive as my other 2 examples, but I think it's a good example of how, like, even if they get a 4th base up, if you deny a 4th base for long enough, it's okay for what am I trying to say? I feel flustered. I'm sorry. What I'm trying to say is, even if we're losing a ton of bases, we never got our 5th up for a very long time. As long as the Terran stays on 3, we're okay. And that's another win condition that we can take advantage of, is you can throw away armies, you can distract the Terran, whatever it takes to deny bases. We can sacrifice our own bases to take out his. A real win condition is to just delay that 4th base until they mine out on these 3. So I think that was a little long-winded, and honestly I probably should have prepared this one a little bit better, but I think it proves the point.
No, yeah, that made a lot of sense.
Okay.
Okay, I have 2 questions.
Yes,
One,
please.
you have a really interesting expansion pattern where you take the natural, or the 3rd mineral only at the other base before you go into
Here.
up the ramp or whatever. Is that something you'd recommend, or is there a reason you're doing that?
You're talking about my 1st, 4th? I would say that this was mostly just habit, to be honest.
Okay.
I think that this is a better base to take. Yes.
Okay.
I think I just had it in my brain to push towards this main, which
Right. Okay.
I think that your 5th should always be at a main or at a natural of a main. So
Okay.
it kind of makes sense to have it here because it's a natural progression. But you could easily take this base and then the main
Right.
here as well. But I think
Right.
the
And why
5th...
wouldn't you take the 4th as a main?
You can. That's totally
Okay.
fine.
Cool.
I prefer having my 4th closer
Got
to me because then I can fight versus vultures more easily.
Right.
Because typically I'll take a 4th ultra early, or as early as I
Right.
can. So you
Right,
have
right.
relatively low Dragoon numbers, and you don't have the luxury of walling this because you need the minerals in that
Right. Okay.
phase.
And then the other thing is, I felt like a lot of this game hinged on really, really good engages because he didn't have science vessels.
That
for a
is
long
true.
time. Okay. Just
So-
wanted to make sure I was reading that.
Oh yeah. And his upgrades were relatively bad as well.
Right.
So I definitely had an advantage in the engagements. I will absolutely give you that. But
Cool.
it's
It's still a really great example. No,
Okay.
that made sense. I just wanted to check that I was seeing that
Yes.
correctly. Got it.
and we can
Okay.
look at a couple engagements, but it's kind of the same as what I've been going through in the other games where
Yeah.
rushing in the zealots and attack moving and all that fun
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
So okay.
Absolutely. That makes sense. I don't need to look at any engagements. I wanted to make sure
Okay.
that I was reading that
Yep.
correctly. Thank you.
I do want to point out on this map though, and I mean something to think about on all maps is where you engage is really important, especially on polypoid. I find polypoid extremely hard to find good engagements on. So if you think about like circuit breakers, that's easy because there's just a giant open middle and he pushes out of his base and we just have a giant ass arc. But polypoid is harder because, like, where's a good point where he has a nice big army? maybe this game doesn't have a good example of it, but I find that it's really hard to find good arcs. Like, you have to either push... So if Terran is pushing radially, like he's pushing through this part, not through the middle, then you really have to push like here to have a good enough engagement. And that's hard because they're probably postured right here. So you have to be ready here, but if they push this direction, you have to be ready here and here. So that becomes really difficult. If they push through the middle, that's much easier because, you know, if they push right here, we can just set up here and here, or even just right here is wide enough that we can push in. But I find it that that's really important and understated when it comes to PvT, where a lot of lower level, and when I say lower level, I mean like B and below, Protoss lose games is Terran can just get to a ridge, and then what do, right? Like, if he gets a ridge here, and then he can siege push through here, you can't ever engage that. It just can't happen. He will kill the space. So you have to be, like, prepared with an army here and here, like, ready to go so that you can engage him here. Once he takes the ramp, it becomes 100 times harder. So I think that's another thing to think about, and another thing that I do think about in more standard PvTs, like the Circuit Breakers game, where if that Circuit Breakers game happened here, I would be posturing up a set of Dragoons here and a set of Dragoons here and having the rest of my shit here. So if he pushes this way, you know, I can delay, back up, and then posture, and then go in. If he pushes out this way, then I can delay with goons, back up, posture here, and then go in. So I think that's a really critical thing to point out as well that I think people underestimate. So I know you missed a lot of the early Wiz, but
yeah, no, I'll go back and look
okay.
at if that's how it engages. You're good.
Well, no, so I went through kind of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm going through the different stages of PvT. I went through engages in 2 different replays, and then I went through basically 3 different win conditions. One, you push with your stasis, your first stasis, and usually max or close to max. You can do, on turtley maps, you just take a shitload of gateways and just never allow them to get their push out of like a fighting spirit or a circuit breakers, or in this game where you just delay the fourth, and then eventually you'll power through because your probes are more spread out.
Okay.
So
Understood.
okay. Does anybody have questions, or can I jump into Ashen's games?
I had a build question, actually.
Sure.
You mentioned going up to 8 gates on 4 bases, I think that's what it was? With 23
Yes.
nexus?
Yep.
When do you add the extra gates on?
After you take your 5th.
Oh, that late, okay.
Yep. So, if you... So this game is just a single player practice. I think I do everything actually correctly for once. So we should be taking our 4th, adding on up to 8 gateways here. I may go to 7, I'm not sure. So this should be 8 gateways ideally. We're going to take our 5th, and then like right now, like I'll make another round of zealots, and then I can add up to 12 gateways until I'm maxed. So really these last few gateways don't even kick in until like they do like 1 round, and then you're maxed out. There they are. So yeah, notice how I'm maxed out and I really only used 7 gateways, and I have my 5th base, and this is a 12-minute max out.
Okay, yeah.
So you want to be super polarized. You want to go like as many fucking probes as I can get, and then as many, like only 8 gateways, and all the units I can produce, and then you slam out nothing but gateways after this. Just every mineral you have, throw down a gateway until you're up to at least 20. Okay. Oh, you're both clanmates and you had to fight each other in CPL.
Yeah,
That's unfortunate.
it didn't go so well.
Okay. That's fine. So this is Sylphid, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sylphid's a good PvT map. I like it.
Yeah, this game's like 37 minutes long or something like that, I think.
Okay.
It's it gets very, very scrappy toward the middle/end.
Okay. Alright, so we are doing our normal thing. So there's no pylons, so we're doing a 23. We scouted. What did we see?
I don't think I actually saw the Nexus. Knowing
Okay.
what I know now, I would have checked for sure. But
Yeah. Okay. So we do see a bunker at least, or we saw the SCV at least, which implies that he's trying to put a bunker down. But yes, this Scoon. Okay, we are going forward. There is a concern with eBay blocking here, so you do kind of want to bully the SCV a little bit, but you really need to send the Scoon as soon as you can and see this command center. So when it ideally showed up and pushed in, we would have seen that the CC was just building. And in that case, this Dragoon, the second Dragoon, has to sit in this choke. Like, that is, like, oh, it's so miserable to lose a game because they just went factory vulture and then fucking killed every probe you have. It's so miserable.
yeah.
So yeah, if you push forward and see the command center just starting, at that point, second Dragoon has to sit here. We're getting 2 gateways. Do we get a third here?
I don't remember.
Okay. Versus everything except for Rax FE, you should get 3 gateways.
Okay.
I've theorized this a lot, actually. I think the reason that 23 Nexus even exists is because of the fact that you can get 3 gateways and you take your third ultra fast. I think that's the only reason the build exists. Otherwise, 28 Nexus is just like equivalent or maybe even better. So, okay, so you're taking a fast third. That's good. But we need to have a scout here. It's not safe to take this third unless we had something here, which we did not. If you back off with your Dragoons, just send a probe here. Set a probe right there until our observer comes. That's pretty critical to the 23 Nexus, I would say. I'm not sure if you were here for the part where I talked about that, or were you?
Which part?
Okay. When I talked about the decision to take a Nexus or to throw on 3 Morgoons.
Yeah, I was there for that.
Okay. Yeah, so that's why we have to sit something in front, because
Gotcha.
that's that decision point we need to know. Okay, so we see a command center, we see 2 factories, 1 with add-on only. So that's an important thing to note as well, where he's only making 1 factory of tanks, which is good to know. Where's our goons? Okay, we got 8 goons, 10 goons, okay. And he has 6 tanks. That's a little scary, but okay, now it's really scary. In theory, now, you know, we see the factories coming up, and we lost those 2 Dragoons, so in theory, he could just do like a round of vultures and go, and it might be a little scary for us. But
Okay.
it looks like you've been producing goons fairly well, so it's not that big of a deal actually. A good timing to know, and I think I mentioned it, but at 9 minutes, ideally you'll have 60 probes. Looks like you were close, but you cut a little bit. 54 is fine. It's a little bit light, but not the end of the world.
Okay.
So here, so we take our 4th. It's all good. We're ahead in supply. What's our vision here? So we see factories. We got ours over here. Okay. I mean, everything looks good. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's fine. We can power on 10. Everything looks good. Do we have a forge with upgrades?
I don't think so.
Okay. Typical timing for forge is if we're not doing a 2-base arbiter, we typically add the forge with the citadel.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yep. And that's not for cannons, it's for upgrades. So there's a breaking point with both zealots or I think it's both zealots and dragoons, but there's a +2 attack breakpoint where tanks will only take 7 shots from a dragoon and vultures will only take 5 shots from a dragoon to die. So that +2 weapons upgrade is actually really important to have before the Terran pushes out with their big 2-1 timing.
That's
because
even
of
if
that
they get
breakpoint.
the +1?
The armor, yes. So you have to either be with +2 weapons, I believe they need +3 armor in order to negate that, if I remember correctly.
Got it.
So
Okay.
we rush for +2 weapons, and that's the most important thing, and then +3 weapons is the next most important but we only have to have that before they get +3 armor, which is usually like super late. So
Right. Okay.
+2 weapons is by far the most important upgrade in PvT. So other than that, everything looks fantastic here. You're ahead in supply. You've got a good probe count. You've got 4 bases. I would like to see more vision on his bases, though, because he could have a 4th here, or here, or here. Right, but there's no base here. Or here. So like he could have a 4th, and we don't know that right now. So that normally for observers, I keep 2 with my army, and then at this point in the game, I would have 1 here, and then I probably would have 1 here, and then I would just throw because in theory he could do like vulture run-bys and things. And then I would just like throw a zealot here and throw a zealot here and have them patrol between there and there. Because, 2 zealots is not that big of a cost in order to delay a 4th, right? And most likely he's going to throw a couple vultures at it anyway. So I think it's really important to be able to see when he's taking a 4th. Because if you had a 4th right now, you would be behind because this 5th is so late. So I think that's pretty important. So Sylphid is a map where they're relatively vulnerable, like we talked about in the first game. They have to either take this base, which means that they're kind of spread between here and here, and we can kind of squeeze through here and attack this base. Or they have to take this base, which means that they're somewhat vulnerable here or here, right? So they can't build anything here, so we can always get in. So I don't mind the stasis push on this map. I think like right now, if you took this arbiter, put a fat stasis right here and ran in, you could easily kill this base.
Okay.
So I don't mind a max, like a max out and then immediately rush in this scenario. So like you just maxed out, like these are the last units to max you out. So you could take this army and just go, like just put your army right here, send a few zealots in first, send the rest of them in, stasis right here, and just take the space out. But I also don't mind if you sit, as long as you're adding a shitload of gateways. Ah, okay, so we do go. Let's back up. So like we talked about in the second game on Circuit Breakers, you really only want to be trading if you have a shitload of gateways. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, which is not quite a shitload. So I think if you had attacked right with your first stasis, that would be good, because Terran is somewhat vulnerable. I mean, this Arbiter was a hair late, so we really should be attacking like now, in theory, if our Arbiter was precisely on time. And you can imagine that this could do some good damage here. And then we just keep making units because we're not maxed out yet, so it's fine, because he's not either. He's at, you have a 50 supply lead, so you can throw away some zealots and be fine. So I like a push at this point, and I also like a push when you do it, but only if you threw down gateways first. If you had put down 10 gateways here, like in the last minute, and then done this push, then it's phenomenal. Like it's perfect. But well, I guess we can watch the. So it looks like you're doing move command. Oh, we forgot some goons back here. That's super common. So this is all really good. Right now we need to back up though, because we're pure goon.
Okay.
So the only time you want to keep engaging is if you had like absolutely demolished their army and they had like almost nothing left. The fact that we lost this many dragoons is painful, especially because we're low on gateways. So just imagine if you had another 10 gateways right now and had retreated when I mentioned it. You would have 2 control groups of dragoons, you would have this group of units, and you'd have 10 more units coming out of here. So really, we would probably be at like 180 supply if we'd had done those 2 things. And then he would be dead, right? Like
Yeah.
you just throw your army at him and he's dead. So I think those 2 things would make a huge difference here. Just sit, because again, when you attacked in, it's a good attack, don't get me wrong. But if you need to take the time to add more gateways, it's fine, because we're on 4 bases and he's on 3. So it's fine. We can wait a little bit. It's not a big deal. So just sit, throw down your gateways, then go. And if it's a little late, no big deal. It's not the end of the world. And then obviously, right
there,
here.
so back up.
Yep, exactly. Because that's, we have a control group and a half of dragoons, and then we actually retreat with like 6. So that mine. Oh.
Yeah, that hurt.
Yep. So that is an opportunity, but I mean the game is not over. I mean you're still at an advantage because he doesn't have a 4th. So and your arbiter's killing tanks, so that's great too. You should have 2 probes be building gateways, to be honest.
Okay.
It's like super simple thing, but like with 4,000 minerals, you want 30 gateways. Like 30 gateways is fine. Throw a pylon here and make another cluster. Throw a pylon here and make a cluster, and just get 30 gateways. Normally a PvT you'll have somewhere between 20 and 30 gateways by the end of it. So here, at this point, it's okay to keep throwing armies, but again, we need the gate count to support it, and I think this is now up to like 17, which is still low. 25 to 30 is typical. But I think the bigger issue, or maybe not the bigger issue, but another issue is we haven't collected our army. Right? Like we have almost max, but it's mostly here in our gateways and here. This army is relatively small. So we don't need to do this attack. It doesn't actually accomplish anything because, again, he's on 3 bases. Time is on our side at this point. So we can just sit and it's no problem. So at this point, this is when it becomes a struggle because we have reset our arbiter count and we only have 1 Stargate producing them. He's going to get this 4th up and our army is smaller than his. So at this point in the game, this is when I would say, okay, yep, I fucked up, and I would go on to the next replay, right? So I think the damage has been done, and it's probably a slow descent into madness at this point.
Yep.
But, we maxed out now. We can get a good engagement and win it. I like that you haven't gone crazy on bases. Like you've just taken the 6th base relatively late. That's really good because this 4th is so late. But again, we need to focus on gateways. So here, this actually could be good for you. We have units in the gates. That's unfortunate. But we're sandwiched. So here, again, we don't need to engage right now. We can wait for the units in our gateways, and then we can attack from both sides here and from the bottom with a full army. Because he's not actively doing damage right now, right? Like if he's sitting here pushing, but not like on top of us, he's not actually doing damage. Like he may be getting to a better position, but we have not our whole army here. We have, 20 supply sitting in gateways. So it's preferable to have our whole army engage him here than to have part of our army engage him here. So I think being patient is another key. Your engagements are good. Like you're spreading out, you're doing a stasis, you're move commanding properly. The only thing that's like repeated is the Dragoons not pulling back. And the patience, I would say. So yeah, here you're doing good damage, but he has secured his 4th. Holy shit, he mined out of all 3 bases. Okay, alright, so we have a game. Yeah, we haven't done much to deny this 4th, but it was, he just didn't take it on time. So, yeah, you should have won this game, man. Holy shit.
Yeah, I would have if I had more gates. It's like.
Yeah, I think that was the key here. And then we're bleeding in, and that's really hard to control. But you have to just re-rally all these guys to right here, and then have more gateways over here. And that's really all it takes. Because, yeah, you're just bleeding into here. So, yeah, I mean, we can continue if we want, but I think the damage is done, really. I mean, you can get out of this because you're 3 base versus 1, but it's very APM intensive because you have to, like, re-rally all these and remake your gates and everything. So it's really hard to do.
Yeah, and I definitely don't do it well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it
Okay.
was basically the end of the game a little while ago. But
I mean, I didn't realize that he had mined out that early, so like, I think you had many opportunities to like you're like an inch away 100 times, right? Like
mhm.
the early push, the stasis push, as I always call it. I think that was an opportunity where you could have done significant damage. This push where we just needed more gates and to pull back our goons, and then yeah, I don't have to keep reiterating. So don't engage unless you have a peak of power like the stasis push, or if you have a shitload of gates, and pull your dragoons back, I would say, are the big ones. I mean, almost everything you've done in the early game is like spot on. The only thing that was wrong was the forge timing, but the fact that you have such a clean early game is really good for you. Just the extra gates and the pulling back goons is really it.
Mhm.
But honestly, if you do those two things, I mean, your PvT looks really good, like 17, 1800, like no problem, to be
Really?
honest. Yeah, I mean, your engages are fantastic. Your macro is really good. I mean, it's all put together. You just that gate count, and obviously I don't know how you do against like 2 facts and 5 facts and shit like that, but
Yeah, those not so well.
okay.
But
Your macro games look, other than those 2 issues, like 1800-ish. Like, it really does. Okay, so here...
yeah, I modeled this somewhat out of some games that Crazy posted, where he was playing Protoss against this guy.
This is
This guy.
arcade, right?
Oh wait, no, sorry, I was thinking of Wugsaw.
Okay.
Yeah, this is arcade. Sorry.
Okay. Okay, so again, if we pushed in, we would have saw that this was factory, and then kept this goon back.
Yeah, these I actually played before the last game, so
Okay.
or I guess this one. So
Okay.
it probably isn't as clean.
Okay. One thing to note is, not only is this goon important to block the vulture, it ain't gonna do anything, right? Because factory bunker expand, the tank's out right when it shows up, so you're not actually gonna do anything with it. So like, when you see this build, there's like 0 reason to not keep it right there.
Okay.
Again, we need 3 gateways. You may not see it. I don't see it particularly often, but the 3 tank push is fucking terrifying, and you really do need 3 gateways to hold it.
Yeah,
So.
some people do that against me sometimes. That one hurts a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, the three gateways helps a lot there. So we're getting our observer. Actually, I should be doing this. Okay, so we're getting our observer and producing off 2 gates, posturing for our 3rd. It's all good. Our probe count is significantly lower than his SCV count, and that should not be the case. So let's see. We desynced. That might be why. Okay. So maybe we desynced before. If we didn't, then let's find out where we went behind. Okay, the usual stuff. 14 pylon. Couple couple gaps, but not that big of a deal. Okay, 23 Nexus, we should put a pylon down. And then... Wait. Okay, that's the
I
second
think I canceled
dragoon.
it because I didn't build the robo.
I would... This dragoon felt late. I don't think you normally should have that dragoon building at that point, but I don't know. So right here we should be building either 2 probes or a dragoon.
Okay.
And that depends. If they're on one base, I make a dragoon. If they went for a bunker expand of some kind, then I make 2 probes at this point. But right after this pylon starts, queue up 2 probes, and then your dragoon. So your dragoon should be showing up as you're building this pylon, or right after. So you start this pylon, you queue up 2 probes. Your dragoon shows up, you run in, look for the command center. If the command center's there, you just keep making the probes. If the command center's not there, you cancel the probes and make a goon. And there you go.
Okay. And you queue up the pros before you build the robo?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Got that backwards.
Yeah, you want to make your 23 out of 25. You want to use that to supply either for a dragoon or for 2 probes. And then immediately make your robo after whichever one you do there on 25.
Okay.
So that's a couple probes. So we should be, we would probably be at 23 right now and even. And I'm wondering if it desynced in before and we weren't actually behind. Okay, so we stopped here.
Yeah, there's a gap.
Ah, the supply block.
Ah.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, so that's why. The 42 supply is super hard to not get supply blocked. I find that I have to like delay goon production a little bit to get that one out. But for any build where they got a command center that early, we should be trying to prioritize probes over dragoons as best we can. The only time that's really tight is at 42 out of 42. Every other time, we should be able to produce pretty constantly. So that's huge, actually. The fact that we should be around 38 right now. We should be about even with the Terran, if not. Well, he did a factory expand, so yeah, we should be about even with the Terran here. So that's pretty painful. Our observer comes in just barely over the turret. 2 factories with add-on. We need to scout the whole base. If we see this armory and the eBay, then we can be fairly comfortable that that we're pretty safe with this Nexus and we can rush towards our tech. Okay. So he's going 6 fact. Okay. So at this point, I would not go for Stargate Tech. I don't know if you do go for it here or not, but
I don't remember.
okay. So you actually let me just watch for a second and then we'll talk. Okay. Yep, okay. So that's an issue here. So oh, I went too far back. Did it it desynced again? Wow. That's a fragile replay here. So oops. So I think that the probes are a big issue. Wow, okay. Alright, we desynced again. That's unfortunate. Alright, I'm just not going to drag it. It seems like it dies every time I drag the bar. Okay, so let's get to about 7:30, 8 minutes. So when our observer gets in and sees 2 factories and an armory, that can either mean that he's about to throw down a command center and take a 3rd, or he's going for a 6 factory. You can pretty much rule out, if you see an armory, you can pretty much rule out a 4 or a 5 factory, but a 6 factory can still come up because that pushes with +1. So 2 factories and an armory, you really can narrow it down to 2 things, either a expansion or a 6 fact. Here, I mean, right when we see these SCVs come up, it's a 6 fact, right? So right now, we know it's a 6 fact. The next thing that we need to do, the thing that we need to do immediately is start adding gateways to match his, and to not get our Stargate tech. If you do a 2-base arbiter, then that arbiter will be on time for this push, but any type of 3-base will not be on time. So basically he'll push you, and as you're dying, a arbiter will pop out and you will lose the game. So so versus 6 factory specifically, you still want the Citadel, but you want it for legs. So so right now what we need to do is we need to cut probes, ideally not having missed that gap so that we would be even with him. But we need to watch his command centers as well. So if he's still building SCVs, we will need to resume. But for now, we want to cut probes and slam down up to 8 gateways, and then start our legs. And then we can resume probes if he's making SCVs. So we see the 6 fact, we slam down up to 8, or we cut probes, slam down up to 8 gateways, start legs, and then we watch the command centers. If he's building SCVs, we resume probes. If he's not building SCVs, then we just macro as hard as we can. But that's, I mean, the gateways are just too late now. So this is just a non-reaction, basically, because we have 5 gateways versus 6 factories, which is not great. So right now, in theory, if we didn't miss the if we didn't have that supply bucket 42, and we had cut for 8 gateways, we would probably be at like 130 supply maybe, and most of that would be in zealots. So this push would actually be not that scary because we could spread it out so we have units here and here, and then right when he tries to push up through here, we just go, and then he would be in pretty rough shape. Or like you did here, I really like this sandwich maneuver. Your army movement is actually quite good. I'm impressed. So yeah, like,
don't pull back the goons.
well, you do here. Maybe. Oh, you were. I think you like moved here or something. That's unfortunate. So like even with the delayed reaction here on adding gates, if you had saved those dragoons, you probably would have cleaned this up here. So you're just like inches away from all these. That's like, you're so close to like pushing through, I feel. So like, again, you can't support 12 gateways at this point off of 48 probes on 3 bases. So 8 is where you would like to stop. I wouldn't mind 9 against the 6 factory. 8 or 9 gateways is where you want to be. But yeah, I think the fact that they were just so late is the problem. So.
Gotcha.
But yeah, if you get that reaction down, I mean, your army control is like fantastic. Like that's way ahead of your decision making, I would say. Maybe not way ahead, but if
Definitely ahead.
yeah, it's ahead. Your army control is great. It's if you can get a little bit better. Just a couple more things like that we talked about. You're going to be really strong in PvT because army control is so important in the matchup.
Yeah, this game is kind of like the first one, but much more sloppy.
Okay.
Well, I guess we'll see it in a minute.
Okay.
But
Okay. The probe is like not a big deal. Like, don't even worry about the probe, or the SCV rather. The only time you need to care about it is if it's denying or about to deny your nexus. But once you get your nexus down, just go, just scout. It's so much more important to scout than to kill that SCV.
yeah, and I think like the builds off this game too, which didn't help any.
Oh, the vulture got in. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's game. I mean, that literally, when that vulture gets in, it's basically game. It's so hard to come back from that. So let's look at the timing here. It should work out just right. So this Dragoon should be rushing forward to scout that this command center's just starting now, which means that he went for a factory bunker expand, which would mean that you can immediately send this Dragoon and hold position right here.
Mm.
And then it clearly would have been in time, right? So that is the reason why we don't chase the SCV, is specifically to decide if this Dragoon should block the choke or not. So this Dragoon has to rush forward and see this command center.
Okay.
Or lack thereof. So if that Dragoon was right there, we would be happy right now. But if this was a ladder game, I would just fucking leave. But since it's a tournament, we stick it out, right? You didn't take that much damage, to be honest. Like, that's not the end of the world. I mean, it's bad, but you know, it's not the worst.
Yeah, it still turns into a game at least,
Yeah.
kind of. But
I mean, he gets his
yeah.
comsats so absurdly early that you actually catch up to probe count, which is really good.
Yeah, and here, when I scout, he has 1 factory, if I remember correctly.
Yep. And
I
a starter-
didn't see
starter.
that. I guess I saw it with the observer, but I didn't actually see it.
Right, I understand.
So I knew something funky was happening, but I wasn't quite sure what. And then I get dropped. And
And that's another thing, like, this could be proxied right now.
mm-hmm.
I mean, that's fairly common to have them proxy this. So, like, if you see 1 factory, you should immediately think, okay, either it's proxy factory, proxy starport, or a hidden command center. When this observer comes, they gotta have something, right? They either have to have, like, armory plus eBay plus academy and, like, a factory starting, or a command center almost done, or something hidden, right? Like, it has to be. It's gotta be something, right? So, anytime you see 1 factory when your observer arrives, just start fucking, like, putting Dragoons for drops, start blocking chokes, start sending a probe to scout for more bases. Like, it's the biggest red flag when you see 1 factory. Yeah.
Yeah, he does like a SC2 drop too, where he goes around the like, entire edge of the map.
Nice. Nice. And this is rough because we're fully walled off at this point, so you really just have to pull probes and then kill a pylon to save it. So again, I mean, nice. um, you're fine here. Like, you've caught up on probes. So you're fine. You clearly got distracted from the drop, so our Arbiter tech is delayed. But we got 4 bases, it's fine. So again, he's got 5 factories. We're going to 7 gateways, that's great. Do we have legs?
I think it just finished. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So yeah, everything looks good here. Arbiter tech, though, it's hard to skip Arbiter tech.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, if I were doing that new style, would I skip Arbiters and just go straight into Storm, or like?
You delay Arbiters significantly. I think you still want them super late, but you would go for Templar first for sure, and you'd be massing shuttles. So like,
Okay.
you almost always want to open up Reaver because that gives you the speed shuttle tech for free, since you are already getting something that synergizes with speed. So you normally want to open Reaver. You can open without getting Reaver, but it's a little bit more awkward. And then you just get 1 control group of goons. Like, you don't actually get the normal 20. And then you just mass shuttles, like 4 to 6 shuttles, constant production, and just speed lots, High Templar, and you just get an army, rush it in, trade for tanks, repeat. It's kind of like I was saying earlier about the CB game, where I'm maxed out, run in, trade, max out, run in, trade. It's the same idea, except instead of maxing out, you just fill your shuttles, run in, trade, retreat with your goons, repeat.
Oh.
So it's the same thing, except you just have to keep Terran from getting a critical tank count. That's the most important thing.
That playstyle wouldn't work on like Fighting Spirit or Circuit Breakers. Then.
No. I mean,
Okay.
CB possibly, because the geometry is okay for small groups of units to be aggressive, just not large groups of units to be aggressive. So like, you can get across the bridges on CB with 80, 60 supply, right? Like, especially when half of them are in shuttles. So CB, I would say you can do that style, but Fighting Spirit would be really, really hard, I think. So here we're...
Yeah, this is just bad.
I do this all the time, where I'm like, I should deny his third, and I have no reason to think that I can deny his third. Like, I mean, you took that vulture damage, you took drop damage, and you have a 4th, so it's like, you really don't have an army advantage there. Like, you can really only deny it if you have an army advantage, so we don't. So in PvT, the only way to counter upgrades for Terran is either arbiters or carriers. That's really it. It's like the new style can circumvent it because they can like keep Terran from ever maxing out, but for any traditional style where we plan to eventually max out ourselves, and Terran will likely max out as well, you have to get either arbiters or carriers to fight upgrades. Like that's like the thing you're comparing is, as he's getting upgrades, we're getting either arbiter tech or carriers. So the fact that you just didn't go for the tech at all, or maybe you're starting now, he's already on 2-1, and our arbiter tech is just starting. So on the tech front, his tech, aka upgrades, is way ahead of ours. So that's a massive disadvantage for us. So even though we have an economical advantage and an army advantage, the tech advantage is massively in his favor, I would say. So we're staying on relatively low gate count until max. That's fine. Taking a 5th against 3 base at this point is fine. Your arc is great. Your map vision is not so great. So at this point, you just want to have obs where Terran can push. So you don't need to see the main anymore. If you can get out with this observer, get out with it. So we really just want to see this ramp, and this ramp with either observers or army. So this ramp's like, you can throw like a zealot here or something, and then have an observer here and a zealot here or something like that. And then a zealot up at this space so that we can patrol between these two and see if he's taking a 4th. But we need to get a little bit better map vision, because in theory, he could push up this way and surprise you and just eat up this army. And the natural reaction of a Protoss when a Terran army attacks right here is to fucking attack move immediately. So obviously these Dragoons would get eaten up, and then your army would just kind of run in. So really need to see right there. These two, I mean, we don't really need to see, but this one we really do, in case he pushes up and surprises us. So now you have good vision. That's good. And our Arbiter came out. He's 2-1, almost 3-2. So 3-2 Terran, you can only fight with stasis. So we're adding gates. Again, we need 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have 13. We need to have like 25 right now, and we can afford it. So that's, again, a problem. But I think the fact that we don't have Arbiter tech is the bigger issue. So again, very good arc. These units could be down a little bit, but the arc is not bad. So right now we should have at least 3 stasis, if this were a typical game. So just imagine 1, 2, 3, and then these front ones just melt, right? So I think that's kind of the key. I think you're going to do well because he's so clumped anyway, but goons. Okay, so yeah, that's 3-2 Terran for you. So I would say yes, the Vulture run by did damage and we should be blocking. Yes, the drop did damage and we should be seeing it coming and preparing. But the lack of Arbiter tech is by far the biggest issue here. You have to match those that armory timing.
Okay.
That's really it, I would say. Nice.
Yeah.
I do that too all the time. I'm just like, fuck, I just need to buy some time, and then I just stasis random group of units.
Yep.
Anyway, so yeah, this game's more or less over because we just don't have the Arbiter tech. So
Yeah, it kind of goes the way that the first one did.
okay.
So.
Yep. Okay, so yeah, I think I can share I don't need to show you right now, but I can give you this rep of a 12-minute max out, which I think might help with your early game. Oh, I'm freezing. But I have a rep of a fast max out where jeez. I can share that with you, and you can look at how I do the 23 Nexus. I accidentally double-clicked a random replay, and now I can't get out of it because I don't have a UI.
Oh.
So that's cool. There we go. But I think the fact that you're not getting a third gateway is a big deal. And the 42 supply, if you know exactly when to add that 42 supply pylon, that might help you avoid a supply block there in the future. Where is that? There it is. So here, I think I do a 3 gateway, I believe. No, I pretend I'm against Raxaphi, so. Anyway, yeah, I can share this with you if you want it. But
I'd like that, thank you.
sure. Okay, do you have any questions or anything? If not, I appreciate you showing up and listening and talking with me and sharing reps.
Yeah, most of my questions would be more oriented toward like early pushes, but I haven't had that happen to me in a little while, so
Okay.
most have been playing PvZ.
Okay. Alright then. Well, I appreciate it. I hope it was helpful. I always feel like I'm super long-winded and repeat myself 100 times, but I hope it wasn't too bad.
No, it was really helpful, thank you.
Okay. Good.
Appreciate that.
Alright. Well, I guess I will see you next time.